On the 11th of May, 2011, 6-year-old Timothy Pitson left his school in Aurora, Illinois with his mother, Amy. Amy had shown up at the school unexpectedly, telling the staff that there was a family emergency. Timothy's teachers were caught off guard as something seemed to be severely off with Amy, but they let Timothy go with his mother, figuring everything was going to be okay. These are some of the most disturbing unsolved cases with video footage. As they drove away from the school, Timothy was excited. He loved spending time with his mother, and they were heading out on what seemed like a special adventure. Amy took him to a zoo, then a water park. It felt like a mini holiday and a chance to have some fun together, just the two of them. They checked into hotels along the way, and at each stop, Amy made sure they had fun. Still, to Timothy, it was probably just an exciting trip with his mom. But there were signs that things weren't as simple as they seemed. Amy wasn't just taking a break. She was avoiding contact with Timothy's dad and other family members. She would call them every now and again, always sounding upbeat, but she never let Timothy talk to anyone. She'd say, "He's fine. He's having fun," but never gave him the phone. When she called her husband, she told him not to worry and that they were fine. In a very cheerful tone, but still, the phone calls left the family uneasy. Why wouldn't she let Timothy speak? The two kept moving from place to place. They stayed in a couple different hotels, moving further and further away from home. Amy was seen on hotel security cameras, and people who saw them said that Timothy looked happy, completely unaware that anything was about to happen. At one point, Amy visited a hardware store where she bought a few items that didn't seem to fit with a road trip. She purchased small things like a notebook and a pen, things that just felt out of place. Amy seemed to be stalling, like she was trying to gain time, but no one knew for what. The choices she made only added to the mystery. Every call to her family sounded upbeat, yet the details made them anxious. Why did she seem so cheerful, but refused to explain what she was doing or let Timothy talk? Amy also checked into a hotel without Timothy for one night, a strange move that raised even more questions. Why would she go to a hotel by herself when Timothy was still with her? And where did she leave the 6-year-old? These, unexplained decisions kept building up, leaving her family more worried with each passing day. When Amy made her last call to her mother-in-law, she sounded calm. She told her that everything was going smoothly and she shouldn't worry about anything. But this time, her mother-in-law pressed her, asking directly to speak with Timothy. Though once again, Amy refused. This time, her excuse was simple. He's busy playing her music. Voice was light-hearted, but there was something strange about her tone, as if she was masking something deeper. On the 14th of May, 2011, Amy checked into a motel in Rockford, Illinois. By then, she and Timothy had been on the road for 3 days. That evening, Amy was spotted on security cameras one last time, and she entered her room alone. Timothy was nowhere to be seen. The next day, motel staff found Amy dead in her room as she had ended her own life. It was a devastating discovery, but the shock didn't end there. Next to Amy's body, police found a note she had written, a message that only deepened the mystery. In her handwriting, Amy explained that Timothy was safe, but added something haunting. "You will never find him." But there was something else in the note that left Timothy's family and investigators terrified. Amy also wrote, "Timothy is safe with people who will care for him." This message seemed to suggest that she had left Timothy with someone she trusted. Someone who could take care of him. But who were these people? And did they even exist? The note left Timothy's family in disbelief. Amy had assured everyone that they were fine. But now she was gone and Timothy was nowhere to be found. As the police combed through her car, they discovered traces of blood on the seat. They immediately tested it and it was confirmed to be Timothy's. This finding raised new fears and new questions as everyone was wondering what had really happened to Timothy. Was he in danger, or had he somehow been left in a safe place as Amy claimed? Investigators were caught between two possibilities. Either Amy had hidden him somewhere to protect him, or something much darker had occurred. Right after Amy's death, police, music, launched an extensive search for Timothy. They retraced every step of her journey, hoping to uncover any clue that might lead them to him. Authorities examined maps, reviewed Amy's GPS records, and revisited every hotel and location she and Timothy had visited, music, during those final days together. And they pored over surveillance footage, hoping to spot a moment, a clue, anything that could reveal where Amy had taken Timothy. As the search continued, investigators found more strange details. Amy's car showed signs that had been through dirt roads and grassy areas. It was clear that she had probably been in remote locations, likely far away from any city or town. But where exactly? Search teams combed through forests, parks, and even isolated areas that matched the clues left by the dirt and plants found on her car. Yet, despite these massive efforts, Timothy was nowhere to be seen. Meanwhile, the story of Timothy's disappearance began to spread across the country. News stations picked up the story, broadcasting pictures of Timothy with his bright smile and innocent eyes. His face appeared everywhere on television, in newspapers, and on missing person posters. The public was captivated by the mystery, and as more details emerged about Amy's final days, music, people began forming their own theories. Timothy's father, Jim Pitson, became the face of the family's heartbreak and hope. Appearing on news interviews, he spoke openly about the pain of losing Amy and the agony of not knowing where his son was. Though he still believed, as Amy's note had said, that Timothy truly was safe somewhere. The general reaction to the case was mixed. Some people sympathized with Jim and clung on to the idea that Timothy was still alive somewhere out there. They rallied for his return, joining search parties, volunteering, and spreading Timothy's story online. Others, however, began to question Amy's actions, and whether her words in the note could be trusted. They speculated that her final message was meant to mislead. And some even believed that Timothy might never be found because he was no longer alive. Then in 2019, 8 years after Timothy's disappearance, the case took a very unexpected, music, twist. A young man appeared claiming to be Timothy Pitson, saying he had finally escaped his captives after years of being held against his will. For a brief moment, hope flooded back. Jim and his family were overwhelmed with emotion, believing that Timothy might be finally returning home. But that hope was crushed just as quickly as it appeared, as DNA tests revealed that the young man was not Timothy. He was in fact someone else entirely. A random troubled person looking for a way out of their own life. Despite the disappointment, Timothy's case remains active. Law enforcement has refused to close it, and his family holds on to the hope that he's still out there. Timothy's disappearance has become one of America's most famous and confusing mysteries. Some still theorize that Amy may have had help, that maybe someone else was involved in Timothy's disappearance, which could help to explain the times that Amy was alone. Checking into the hotels. The idea is based partly on her note where she mentioned Timothy being with people who would care for him. Though to this day, there's no evidence supporting this theory, but the idea that Timothy might still be out there hidden with someone who knows the truth keeps the mystery alive. You can't give up hope. As soon as you give up hope, then what should I do? I declare him dead. He's probably in the middle of nowhere being homeschooled someplace, just away from the media and TVs and new technology. It was still dark in Midlothian, Texas on the morning of the 18th of April, 2016. For 45-year-old Terry Missy Beavers, a fitness instructor and mother of 3, this was a normal time to be up and ready. She was dedicated to her fitness classes, regularly teaching early morning sessions. She had a class scheduled at Creekide Church of Christ that day, and she was known for showing up early to set everything up. Around 4:20 a.m., Missy entered the church. Her headlights briefly illuminating the parking lot before going dark. With her workout equipment and supplies in hand, she made her way inside, likely unaware of the danger that awaited her. What she didn't know was that someone had already broken in. Hours before Missy arrived, Creek-eyed Church had been empty. But by 3:50 a.m., a figure had appeared inside, roaming the halls in a way that would later raise unsettling questions. Security cameras captured the footage of this person, someone whose actions seemed more bizarre than purposeful. The intruder was dressed head to toe in SWAT-style tactical gear, including a helmet, vest, and gloves, all of which concealed their identity. Obviously, this wasn't ordinary clothing, especially for someone committing a crime, and it was something that law enforcement would later struggle to explain. As I couldn't figure out if it was merely just a disguise, or some sort of message. As the figure moved through the church, their actions were equally strange. Instead of heading directly to an office, a safe, or any obvious target, the person walked around, opening doors, checking rooms, and tapping on walls. Their pace was calm, almost wondering. As if they had all the time in the world, as it didn't seem like they were searching for anything specific. Instead, it felt as though they were just waiting. The security footage further showed this person pausing here and there, standing silently before moving again. It was this slow, almost detached movement that would later haunt viewers. And in one of the stranger aspects caught on the camera was the fact that the figure seemed to even stagger slightly as they walked, very clumsily, as it looks as if they could be unfamiliar with the layout of the church or they're in some kind of daze. At around 4:20 a.m., just as Missy entered the church, the camera footage ended. To this day, it's unclear exactly how much time passed between Missy walking into the church and her encounter with the intruder. But what is known is that Missy was soon to be found dead. Her body discovered by her students who arrived for class a short time later. The scene that they would walk into was shocking. Missy had suffered multiple injuries that was believed to have been inflicted by a hammer that was left near her body. After her death, the investigators turned to Creek-eyed Church's security cameras, hoping they held the clues that could identify Missy's killer. What detectives found is that the footage raised far more questions than it answered. Like as the figure moved throughout the church, they would also periodically break certain objects and shatter glass, leading the police to believe that the person was trying to stage some sort of robbery gone wrong. Though that theory would make little sense when you consider that the robber neglected to take Missy's purse or iPad. Also, why had they chosen a church of all places? And what was the motive? If this was a robbery, it was certainly an unusual one. After the discovery of Missy's body at Creek-eyed Church, Midlothian police faced a daunting task. Because there was just so little to go off, the detectives involved started watching the footage over and over again to music. Find the tiniest of details, which then made them notice the killer's strange gait or walking style, as they seemed to move with a slight clumsiness, as if they were wearing shoes too big or simply had a very distinct walk. Internet detectives then started comparing the walk to those around Missy. And if you line up the videos of the SWAT-geared intruder with those of her father, they do look eerily similar. That this evidence, if you can even call it that, is extremely weak and is a symptom of the case being so mysterious and confusing. The police, music, themselves initially thought that the intruder could be female, as the wart looked as if the person was wearing clothes too big or too heavy. Though again, this theory led nowhere. As detectives continued analyzing the footage, they turned to Missy's family, friends, and acquaintances, hoping to uncover any motive or clue that could point them towards a suspect. They asked about Missy's relationships, any recent conflicts, and her schedule, searching for anything that might explain why someone would target her. Missy's husband, Brandon, her 3 children, and her close friends all cooperated fully, sharing information about Missy's life and any challenges she might have been facing. According to her loved ones, Missy was well-liked, devoted to her family, and passionate about her work as a fitness instructor. However, some friends mentioned that Missy had recently expressed concerns about strange social media message she had received. These messages on LinkedIn reportedly came from an unknown male and were described as creepy and strange. The police would track down this person of interest, though ultimately turned out to be a dead end. Detectives documented everything they had learned. Yet, no single piece of information pointed directly towards a clear suspect. To this day, Terry Missy Bever's case has gone completely unsolved. Alissa Turney was a typical 17-year-old high school junior living in Phoenix, Arizona with her father, Michael Turney, and, Clear's throat, half-sister Sarah. Like most teenagers, she had a part-time job, friends, and dreams for the future. But on the 17th of May, 2001, everything changed. That was the day Alissa vanished without a trace, and the mystery of her disappearance would leave her family and community searching for answers for years to come. It was the last day of school, and Alissa was looking forward to summer break. She and her friends had made plans to celebrate, and it seemed like a typical start to what should have been a carefree summer. But what happened that afternoon has been clouded by strange details. Some coming from her father, Michael himself, who was the last person to ever see her. According to Michael, he picked up Alissa from Paradise Valley High School around lunchtime. He claimed that they went out for a bite to eat at a local restaurant, and then once they returned home, they had a heated argument. Michael would later tell the police that Alissa stormed off, shouting that she was leaving and heading to California to live with her biological aunt. To back this story, Michael claimed he found a note from Alissa in her room, saying basically exactly what she was saying in the argument, that she was running away. The note, written in Alissa's handwriting, didn't sit right with Alissa's friends and family. For one, none of her belongings, like her phone or purse, were missing. If Alissa truly intended to run away, why would she leave behind everything she'd need? And why didn't she tell any of her close friends about her plans? Initially, authorities treated Alissa as a runaway, believing that she might have truly gone to California or was still somewhere nearby in the Phoenix area. However, doubts started to arise when the $1,800 in her bank account was left completely untouched, and she failed to contact any of her friends and family. As police started to investigate further, they discovered something odd. Michael had been tracking Alissa's movements in ways that went beyond what many see as protective. In fact, he seemed to have an unusual level of control over her life. At her job, Alissa's co-workers noticed Michael, but occasionally appear unannounced, sometimes with a video camera. In one instance, he secretly recorded his daughter's interactions with customers, co-workers, and friends, claiming it was to ensure her safety, but there was no clear reason why he would have to monitor her like this. These recordings weren't limited to her workplace, either. Michael had even installed surveillance devices around their home. And one of the most disturbing details was the discovery of hidden recording devices in the family's living room. It's unknown how often Michael reviewed these recordings, but it was clear he had an intense need to keep tabs on Alissa's actions and conversations. This kind of behavior extended into nearly every aspect of Alissa's life. Michael kept strict control over her social life, reportedly screening her phone calls and limiting her time with friends. Alissa's friends record that Michael seemed overly protective and suspicious, making her feel uncomfortable and trapped. They reported that Alissa felt she couldn't do anything without her father knowing. And over time, she grew increasingly resentful of his intense surveillance. For any teenager, this level of control would have felt suffocating. Though, it gets much more worrying. When the police were taking statements from those who knew Alissa to try and find any leads revolving her disappearance, one of her close friends, her boyfriend, and her stepbrother all independently shared stories that they had heard from Alissa, all involving Michael attempting to illegally and inappropriately touch his daughter. In one instance, Alissa's stepbrother said that during a car ride, Michael scooted closer to Alissa and then tried to touch her in ways that would certainly get him arrested if anyone had reported it. Speaking of which, Michael himself once called Child Protective Services to warn them that if Alissa was to ever call them to accuse him of touching her strangely, that she's a liar, a very normal thing for a loving father to do. Then somehow the strangeness continues. Michael was fixated on a very particular incident involving Alissa. He frequently brought up the claim that years prior Alissa had been beaten by a teacher. Michael often told people he believed this incident deeply affected her. Yet, there was no concrete evidence of it ever happening. Interestingly, Michael's account of the incident would often shift, making it hard for investigators to verify. Alissa's close friends noted that she had never mentioned this supposed assault, and many doubted it ever happened. Michael, however, used this story as a justification for his extreme protectiveness, insisting that he was simply trying to shield Alissa from further harm. Then there was the matter of Alissa's aunt. When the police followed up, they learned that Alissa's aunt in California hadn't heard from her and wasn't expecting her to come. This detail obviously threw more doubt on Michael's story. If Alissa had indeed intended to run away, why hadn't she contacted the aunt that she was supposedly going to stay with? To the police, Alissa's disappearance started looking less like a runaway case and more like a mystery. But without clear evidence of any sort of crime taking place, the case stalled. One of the most unsettling details about Alissa's case is that her disappearance was marked by a quiet inaction from Michael himself. Normally, parents of missing children are frantic, calling every friend and visiting every place they can think of to find their child. But Michael didn't seem to do any of that. Instead, he waited 5 days after Alissa vanished to report her missing. For many, this delayed response obviously raised suspicion. When asked why he waited, Michael claimed that he thought Alissa would return home when she had cooled off, insisting that she was just a rebellious teen who had run away in the heat of the moment. After years of frustration, doubt, and silence, one voice would rise above the uncertainty surrounding Alissa disappearance, her younger sister, Sarah. Driven by a desire to know what really happened, Sarah Turney became the leading force behind Alissa's case, refusing to let her sister's story fade. For years, she struggled to understand what had happened and to reconcile the loss of her sister with the vague and suspicious stories told by her stepdad, Michael. As Sarah grew older, her curiosity deepened. She began questioning the details surrounding Alissa's disappearance and eventually recognized the inconsistencies in the story that Michael had shared with her over the years. While police had long classified Alissa's case as a runaway situation, Sarah began to suspect that it was something far more sinister. At first, Sarah tried addressing her concerns within her family. She asked Michael directly about what had happened and pushed for answers. Michael insisted that Alissa had simply left, that she had run away and wanted nothing to do with them anymore. Yet, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to the story, and that her stepdad might be hiding something crucial. Sarah also reached out to law enforcement, hoping they could reopen the case. But with no new evidence, and Alissa's status officially labeled as a runaway, the police weren't able to provide much assistance. Despite these roadblocks, Sarah continued her quest, refusing to accept that her sister's case would remain unsolved. Frustrated by the lack of progress, Sarah took matters into her own hands, and turned to social media. She started sharing Alissa's story online, using every platform available, to spread awareness and gain support. Over time, her post began to capture attention, and Sarah's online presence grew. But it wasn't until she joined TikTok that her fight for justice truly gained momentum. On TikTok, Sarah adopted a very direct and honest, approach. She very openly talked about her suspicions of Michael as well as her struggle to keep the case alive. Sarah wasn't afraid in the slightest to speak out against her own stepdad, publicly, declaring that she believed he was responsible for Alissa's disappearance. Her boldness was both risky and shocking, but it was effective on TikTok as viewers admired her courage to speak out, even when it meant accusing a family member. After years of uncertainty and years of advocacy from Sarah, the investigation into Alissa's disappearance took a significant turn. In August 2020, nearly 2 decades after Alissa was last seen, police arrested her stepfather, Michael Turney, charging him with secondary murder. Investigators pieced together patterns of Michael's controlling behavior, leading to the decision to formally reopen the case and charge him. The secondary murder charge against Michael Turney indicated that the authorities believed he had killed Alissa without premeditation. However, the lack of any direct physical evidence linking Michael to Alissa's disappearance posed a significant challenge for the prosecution. Despite these hurdles, Sarah and her supporters remained hopeful that the circumstantial, music, evidence and Michael's own actions would lead to a conviction. In July 2023, Michael Turney's trial commenced. After 6 days of testimony, the defense filed a motion for an acquit, arguing that the prosecution had not presented substantial evidence to support a conviction. The judge agreed, citing the absence of physical evidence proving Alissa's death on Michael's involvement, and acquitted Michael of all charges. He was released from custody on July 18, 2023. Following his release, Michael Turney took legal action against local officials. In January of 2024, he filed a lawsuit against the Phoenix Police Department as Michael alleged he was mistreated during his time in custody, claiming he was denied adequate health care and meals and asserted he was wrongfully imprisoned. As of today, the case of Alissa Turney has gone completely cold. If Alissa's out there, any message for her? Same message I've always tried to give it, which is, I love her. You want her to come home? Obviously. So, the holiday of a lifetime, a Caribbean cruise, warm beaches, and the endless blue of the open sea. Amy Lynn Bradley, a 23-year-old recent college graduate from Virginia, was thrilled about the trip. Traveling with her family, she boarded the Royal Caribbean cruise ship, Rhapsody of the Seas, on March 21, 1998. Amy was excited, but also a little bit nervous. Friends and family said she wasn't exactly the cruise type. Amy was athletic, outgoing, and independent, but she had a fear of open water, which made the cruise ship a bit of a leap outside her comfort zone. The night of March 23 should have been just like any other night on the cruise ship. The family enjoyed dinner and Amy later went to a nightclub on the ship with her brother Brad. The siblings had a fun night dancing and chatting with the other passengers. And in a video taken that night, Amy looked happy and carefree. Around 3:30 a.m., Brad left the club to go to bed, and Amy told him she'd be right behind him. This was the last confirmed sighting of Amy by her family. Early next morning, things took a shocking turn. Around 5:30 a.m., Amy's father, Ron Bradley, woke up in their shared cabin. He noticed that Amy wasn't in her bed, which immediately set off the alarms in his head. It was strange for Amy to be up that early, especially since they'd been out late the night before. Ron initially assumed she might have gone up to the deck to watch the sunrise, and he figured she'd be back soon. But as the minutes passed and Amy didn't return, Ron's concern grew. He searched around the ship looking for any sign of his daughter as he checked the common areas, the decks, and even went to the ship's dining area. But there was no trace of Amy. Feeling increasingly desperate, he woke up the rest of the family. They searched for her together, hoping to find her asleep somewhere else or chatting with a friend. But Amy was nowhere to be found. By 6 a.m., the family reported Amy's disappearance to the ship's crew. At first, the crew didn't seem as worried as the Bradleys were. They suggested that maybe Amy had gone for a swim, fallen asleep somewhere, or even gone ashore on her own during an early port stop. However, Amy's family knew she wouldn't have just wandered off without telling them. They insisted that something was wrong and pushed for a more thorough search of the ship. The search of the Rhapsody of the Seas was extensive, but it wasn't fast. Crew members scanned every deck, every room, every public area for any sign of Amy. Still, nothing turned up. By midday, the captain made an official announcement: alerting all passengers to Amy's disappearance and asking for any information. But despite everyone's efforts, it was as if she had just vanished into thin air. Amy's family then tried to convince the captain to stop the boat until Amy had been found. As if the worst-case scenario had happened and she had been kidnapped. She could then be smuggled off the ship when they'd eventually reached the port. The captain ignored their pleas and continued to drive the boat, allowing everyone off the ship. For the Bradley family, the idea that Amy might have gone overboard was unbearable. She was a strong swimmer and wouldn't have been careless around the water. Plus, Amy had left behind her shoes and her identification in her cabin, which raised even more questions. Could she have met someone who persuaded her to leave her cabin? Or had she encountered someone with darker intentions? While Amy's family, desperate for answers, recalled several strange interactions she had with crew members during the trip. A few days before she vanished, Amy mentioned feeling uncomfortable around some of the crew. According to her family, she felt watched. One particular crew member had approached her several times, showing an unusual amount of interest in her. He reportedly invited her to go dancing at the club off the ship, which she turned down. Then her family noticed something very worrying. On board the ship, there was an area where photos of passengers were displayed. Pictures taken by the ship's photographers available for families to view and buy. But something was wrong. All the photos featuring Amy had vanished. Her family couldn't help but wonder, had someone intentionally removed her pictures? If so, who would do such a thing and why? And as time passed, some people have claimed to have seen Amy, fueling the theories that she might still be alive. Several witnesses came forward saying that they had seen a woman matching Amy's description in the Caribbean. These sightings included accounts from a sailor and tourist who saw a woman resembling Amy with men who seemed to control her. In one case, a Canadian tourist reported seeing a woman in a brothel in Barbados. The woman allegedly begged for help, saying she was in fact Amy and was not allowed to leave. These sightings gave Amy's family hope, but all of them led to dead ends. When followed up by authorities, no concrete evidence was found, and the woman in the sightings was never confirmed to be Amy. The descriptions were often vague, and some sightings happened in chaotic settings. Still, for the Bradleys, each new sighting brought a glimmer of hope, which is also connected to perhaps the most disturbing theory of all, being that Amy had been abducted and sold into human trafficking. The idea was bolstered years later when a chilling piece of evidence emerged as a photo of a woman resembling Amy was found on an adult website. The woman in the photo had a similar tattoo to Amy, and her appearance is undeniably similar, considering that she would be several years older. Amy's parents saw the photo and were convinced it was her. They believed the image was proof that Amy was alive, trapped in a terrifying situation from which she couldn't escape. Investigators found evidence of human trafficking rings operating within the Caribbean, and a young woman like Amy traveling alone at night on the ship could have been a target. Her family began to suspect that if someone had lured her, they might have forced her off the ship in one of the island ports and into a dark underground network. Either way, until this day, Amy Lynn Bradley is still missing 26 years later. Kenny Beach was no ordinary hiker. Kenny was the kind of person who thrived on adventure. He had been hiking for years, tackling some of the hardest trails in the southwest United States. Friends described him as fearless and intensely curious, which perhaps is what eventually led to his unfortunate end. He documented one of his hikes on YouTube where he'd gained a small viewer base and talked about some of his findings. In the endless stretches of the Mojave Desert, there were abandoned mines, strange caves, and even government training grounds all around the place. Kenny's viewers became captivated by his discoveries, eagerly awaiting another upload. And for Kenny, their excitement seemed to fuel his own. Despite the dangers, Kenny found a sense of freedom in these remote places. But he also knew the risks. A simple slip on a rock, a broken bone, or getting lost without cell reception could mean life or death. Yet, Kenny believed the rewards were worth the risk. Kenny once shared that he had a habit of exploring alone, even when people warned him against it. Hiking alone in a desert like the Mojave was not something that most would consider. But Kenny saw it differently. He believed that hiking alone sharpened his senses and it forced him to be more aware of his surroundings without the distractions of company. He could listen to the desert and focus on the details he might otherwise overlook. His viewers and also he probably knew that each time he went out there alone, he was taking a chance. But it was a chance he seemed willing to take again and again. But there was one discovery that would change everything. It wasn't just another rocky canyon or long abandoned mine. It was something different. And I'm looking for a cave that I found and I didn't have a sidearm when I was here before. And something about that cave just spooked me. Out of all the caves I've ever gone in, this one just made my body vibrate. The closer I got to it, the crazier my body felt. And I was like, alright, I'm not going to go in there right now, but I'm coming back someday. So, hopefully I'll find it. It's shaped like a big M. It's a big cave that looks just like a gigantic M and it's about as tall as I am and kind of narrow and, it's stuck on the side of a mountain. So, I hope I can find it again. His viewers began to speculate about what might have caused such a strange reaction. Some thought it was natural, maybe an odd geological feature or maybe a minor earthquake, and obviously others immediately believed there was something more mysterious at play, like secret military experiments or something supernatural. Kenny read through all the comments and it was clear that the mystery of the M-shaped cave had captured the minds of many. People were sending him messages pushing him to return to the desert and explore the cave. It wasn't like him just to back down from a challenge, and the encouragement from his viewers made it harder for him to ignore the mystery. But he was also cautious. He knew that returning to such a remote location was risky, especially with the strange sensation he had felt. Was it really worth the danger? Despite the fear of the unknown, Kenny decided he couldn't let this mystery go. He wanted answers just as much as his audience did, maybe even more. And soon, he announced his plans to go back, determined to find out once and for all what was inside that cave. Kenny prepared carefully for this trip, aware of the dangers that awaited him in the desert. Even for an experienced hiker like him, the Mojave held countless risks. This wasn't just a quick day hike. The remote location of the cave meant that he'd have to navigate miles of rugged terrain with limited supplies and no phone reception. In case anything went wrong, Kenny let his girlfriend and a few close friends know where he'd be heading. This way, they'd have an idea of his location if he didn't come back. Then days passed and no one heard from Kenny. At first, his friends and family assumed he was still exploring, caught up in the thrill of adventure. But as more time went by, their worry grew. Kenny's girlfriend reported him missing and a search operation was launched as teams of rescue workers scoured the Mojave Desert, covering every trail and checking every canyon. They looked for signs of his presence, hoping to find any clue about where he might have gone. During the search, they discovered Kenny's phone lying on the ground near an abandoned mine shaft. This was miles from any marked trail and deep within the desert. The phone had no interesting messages, no final recordings, no indication of what might have happened to him. It was as if he had left it on purpose or dropped it by accident before going further into the wilderness. I mean, why would he leave it behind? Despite extensive search efforts, no other trace of Kenny was ever found. The team searched for weeks, covering the surrounding area and examining any possible routes he might have taken. But the desert is vast and its rocky, uneven terrain makes it difficult to find someone, especially in the had been taking care of Alissa. She continued to give inconsistent statements about why she allowed her daughter to spend so much time with him. Her explanations were often contradictory, shifting between trusting Tatum as a caring figure and being unaware of the danger her daughter faced. Shemika's behavior either suggested a stupidly high level of trust in a stranger or a complete failure to recognize the risks associated with allowing her daughter to be in Tatum's care. And on April 1, 2014, likely the worst-case scenario had happened. Killed Tatum was found to have taken his own life in a shed in Kenilworth Park, which was an area that had already been searched for Relisher. Tatum was the last person seen with Relisher. So when he died, he took many of the answers with him. His death left police scrambling for leads. But despite searches and tips, now they weren't even certain if Relisher was alive, alone, or had been given to someone else. Purely speculating. I think it's possible that Tatum may have had a less than legal relationship with Relicia and may have been exploiting her with Shemika's permission. Perhaps Tatum's wife Andree found out and that was the motive behind her unfortunate death. Though the true motive behind Relicia Rudd's disappearance will likely never be known. And that concludes today's video. If you want more disturbing content, you can check out this video that YouTube thinks you'll enjoy. Thanks for watching.